Welcome back. We're reading the Sealed Nectar. It is the biography of the Noble Prophet, a Patreon requested book. We are on page 75 in the subsections that says Religion of the Arabs. The Abyssinian Ethiopian colonization forces entered Yemen again in 525 CE. It was as a retaliation for the injustice of Dehu Nawas, and they started to zealously propagate their faith. They even built a church and called it the Yemeni Kaaba, with the aim of directing the Arab pilgrimage caravans towards Yemen, and then made an attempt to demolish the sacred house in Mecca. Allah the Almighty, however, punished them and made an example of them, here and in the hereafter. The principal tribes that embraced Christianity were Ghassan, Talib, Tai, and some Himyarite kings, as well as other tribes living on the borders of the Roman Empire. Magianism was also popular among the Arabs living in the region of Persia, Iraq, Bahrain, Al-Ahsa, and some areas of the Arabian Gulf Coast. Some Yemenis are also reported to have professed Magianism during the Persian occupation. I never heard of Magianism, but I definitely want to read a book now about it. As for Sabianism, excavations in Iraq revealed that it had been popular amongst Chaldean folks, the Syrians and Yemenis with the advent of Judaism and Christianity. However, Sabianism began to give way to the new religions, although it retained some followers mixed or adjacent to the Magians in Iraq and the Arabian Gulf. Never heard of Sabianism either. Should look these up later. Think it'd be cool. The religious situation. Such was the religious life of the Arabs before the advent of Islam. The role that the prevalent religions played was only marginal. The polytheists who faked Abrahamism were detached from its principles and inherent good manners. They were indulged into disobedience, ungodliness, and certain peculiar superstitions that managed to leave a serious impact on the religious and socio-political life in the whole of Arabia. Judaism turned into repulsive hypocrisy along with the control of power. Rabbis turned into lords to the exclusion of the Lord. Their sole target became the gaining of wealth and power, even if it were at the risk of losing their religion, or the emergence of atheism and disbelief. Christianity likewise opened its doors wide to polytheism and got too difficult to figure out as a heavenly religion. As a religious practice, it developed a sort of peculiar mix of man and God. Today that happens too. It exercised no bearing whatsoever on the souls of the Arabs, who accepted it simply because it had no concern with their style of life, and did not have the least relationship with their practical life. People of other religions were similar to the polytheists with respect to their inclinations, dogmas, customs, and traditions. Okay, the new section says aspects of pre-Islamic Arabian society. We're learning a lot about, especially if you think about history-wise, it's going to provide us with a bigger context, which I think is valuable in and of itself. After the research we have made into the religious and political life of Arabia, it is appropriate to speak briefly about the social, economic, and ethical conditions prevalent therein. Social life of the Arabs. The Arabian society presented a social mixture with different and diverse social levels. The status of women among the nobles recorded an advanced degree of esteem, where women enjoyed a considerable portion of free will, and their decision would most often be enforced. They were so highly cherished that blood would be easily shed in defense of their honor. In fact, they were the most decisive key to bloody fight or friendly peace. These privileges notwithstanding, the family system in Arabia was wholly patriarchal, having the supremacy of the older members of the clan. The marriage contract rested completely in the hands of the woman's legal guardian, whose words with regard to her marital status could never be questioned. Marriage contract. What an interesting thing. I think today, do people have those? Only in weddings now that I see is you say your vows. And even people don't even write their own vows. They like look on Pinterest and get like a very cliche vows. On the other hand, there was other social circles where prostitution and indecency were widespread and in full operation. Al-Bukhari and others reported on the authority of Aisha, peace be upon him symbol, I think, that were four kinds of marriage in pre-Islamic Arabia. The first was similar to present-day marriage procedures, in which case a man gives his daughter or the woman under his responsibility in marriage to another man after a proposal and a dowry has been agreed on. You know, you really got to be able to trust your dad, right? To make the right decision to give you a good man. I don't think I'd give anyone in my family the responsibility of assigning me a man. In the second, the husband would send his wife, after the menstruation period, to cohabit with another man in order to conceive. I wonder if that was because, like, he was infertile or something. After conception, her husband, if he desired, would have a sexual intercourse with her. Oh, there's just like open marriages. What do they call that? Swingers? There's things like that called swingers in the United States. A third kind was that a group of less than 10 men would have sexual intercourse with a woman. Oh, a gangbang. If she conceived and gave birth to a child, she would send for these men, and nobody could abstain. They would come together to her house. She would say, "You know what you have done. I have given birth to a child, and it is your child," pointing to one of them. So the communal families. Okay. The man meant would have to accept it. The fourth kind was that a lot of men would have sexual intercourse with a certain woman, a whore. She would not prevent anybody. Wow. Such women used to put a certain flag at their gates to invite in anyone who liked. If this whore got pregnant and gave birth to a child, she would collect those men, and a seeress would tell whose child it was. What a bad system. The appointed father would take the child and declare him or her his own. That's strange. When Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, declared Islam in Arabia, he cancelled all these forms of sexual contacts, except that of pre-Islamic marriage. Women always accompanied men in their wars. The winners would freely have sexual intercourse with such women. Okay, so they accompany men in their wars. Now, were they just like the camp whores, or were they actually soldiers? And then because there's a woman soldier and there's a guy and they just survived this crazy battle, some people get hot blood when, after a fight, and then they want to do something. So I wonder if it's like soldiers having sex with other soldiers, like female soldiers with male soldiers, or these are just whores in camps, because there's usually whores in camps all the time. It's bad. Like, it's bad. Your soldiers can get distracted, right? You get attacked by the enemy and your soldiers are busy whoring around. They're trying to grab their equipment and get focused. It's a very strange thing to allow in your camp. But disgrace would follow the children conceived in this way all their lives. Oh, those poor children. Pre-Islam Arabs had no limited number of wives. I don't see a problem with that as long as you can take care of them. What's the issue? They could marry two sisters at the same time. Now that would be gross. I could never share a husband with my sister. It would be too much drama. I don't want to. If he kisses her and then kisses me, I don't want to taste the germs or the essence of my sister. It's disgusting. Or even the wives of their fathers, if divorced or widowed. The wives of their fathers. Why on earth would anyone ever want to sleep with someone their dad has been in? That sounds like sloppy seconds to me. Okay, and then there's a quote here. "And marry not women who your father married, except that has already passed. Indeed it was shameful and most hateful, and an evil way. Forbidden to you for marriage are your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your father's sisters, your mother's sisters, your brother's daughters, your sister's daughters, your foster mother who gave you suck, your foster milk suckling sisters, your wives, your mothers, your stepdaughters under your guardianship, born of your wives to whom you have gone in, but there is no sin on you if you have not gone in them." That's true. "To marry their daughters, the wives of your sons who spring from your own loins, and 2 sisters in wedlock at the same time. Except for what has already passed, verily Allah is Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. 4:22-23. That seems like some natural reform. It is strange when you see people who are so lazy they decide to inbreed within their own family. It's like the planet is huge. Go out there and meet somebody. Divorce was to a very great extent in the power of the husband. The evil of adultery prevailed among all social classes for a few men and women whose self-dignity prevented them from committing such an act. Free women were in much better condition than the female slaves, who constituted the greatest calamity. Yeah, female slaves didn't really have much liberty. It seemed that the greatest majority of pre-Islam Arabs did not feel ashamed of committing this evil. Abu Dawood reported, a man stood up in front of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and said, "O Prophet of Allah, that boy is my son. I had sexual intercourse with his mother in the pre-Islamic period." The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "No claim in Islam for pre-Islamic affairs. The child is to be attributed to the one on whose bed it was born, and stoning is the lot of a fornicator." End quote. The story about Sa'id bin Abi Waqas, peace be upon him, and Abid bin Zama disputing over Abdur Rahman bin Zama, the son of Zama, is well known. With respect to the pre-Islam Arab's retaliation with his offspring, we see that life in Arabia was inconsistent and presented a dark picture of contrast. Whilst some Arabs held children dear to their hearts and cherished them greatly, others buried their female children alive because an imaginary fear of poverty and shame weighed heavily on them. Oh, that's terrible. How can you see a cute little baby and want to do that? And they would kill their children for fear of poverty and hardship. Man, I couldn't imagine being a neighbor and then looking out your window and seeing somebody trying to bury a kid. I don't know how any woman who had just suffered giving birth would not die trying to defend the life of her baby. I can't imagine. Shame on the women who did not stand up and stop that. Indeed, they're helpless. But sometimes in life, you gotta go out with your fist going. And then there's a quote here, "And do not kill your children because of poverty. We provide for you." 6:151. And when the news of the birth of a female child is brought to any of them, his face becomes dark, and he is filled with inward grief. He hides himself from the people because of the evil of that whereof he has been informed. Shall he keep her with dishonor, or bury her in the earth? Certainly evil is their decision. 16:58-59. Another quote, "And do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We provide for them and for you." 17:31. Next quote, "And when the female infant buried alive shall be questioned." 81:8. We should not think, however, that the act of killing infants was commonplace and widespread, simply because of the great need they had for sons to fight with them against their enemies. Another aspect of the Arab's life which deserves mention is the Bedouin's deep-seated emotional attachment to his clan. Family, or perhaps tribal pride, was one of the strongest passions with him. The doctrine of unity of blood, as the principle that bound the Arabs into a social unity, was formed and supported by tribal pride. Unity of blood. I'm glad I don't have that. Just because someone's your blood or you're the same race doesn't mean I need to agree with everything they do. Now, your bloodline, your skin tone, none of that means you're going to be good or bad. It's all based on your own decisions. So therefore, if someone tells me I have the blood of Italians, I'm like, okay. That doesn't mean I'm going to listen to you or want to die for you. Their undisputed motto was, "Support your brother whether he is an oppressor or oppressed." In its literal meaning, they disregarded the Islamic amendment which states that supporting an oppressor brother means preventing him from aggression. Desire for leadership, keen sense of competition, and ambition to excel others often resulted in bitter tribal warfare despite there being for one common ancestor. Ambition to excel. Yeah, some people get very ferocious when they want to climb up. In this regard, the continued bloody conflicts of Aus and Khazraj, Abs and Duhibian, Barak and Talib, etc., are striking examples. Intertribal relationships were fragile and weak due to continual and destructive intertribal warfares, deep devotion to religious superstitions, and some customs held in esteem, however, used to control their reckless tendency to quench their thirst for blood. In other cases, there were the motives of and respect for alliance, loyalty, and dependency that could successfully bring about a spirit of affinity and groundless bases of dispute. A time-honored custom of suspending hostilities during the prohibited months, Muharram, Rajab, Dhul Qa'dah, and Dhul Hijjah, functioned favorably and provided an opportunity for them to earn their living and coexist in peace. We may sum up the social situation in Arabia by saying that the Arabs of the pre-Islamic period were groping about in the dark and ignorance, entangled in a mess of superstitions, paralyzing their mind and driving them to lead a cattle-like existence. Cattle, what's interesting about them, you got that work dog. They can kind of frighten them and lead them into the slaughterhouse. So sometimes cattle, we need them to, you literally need a cow to be dumb and docile so you can eat it and live off of it, right? Get its milk, stuff like that. But when people become that way, they can be shuffled into the slaughterhouse, which is to their own detriment, right? So when you say people are sheeple or they're being led like sheep, the lamb to the slaughter, it's not really a good thing to be compared to livestock, but some people like it. They say, welcome to the flock. No, I don't like a title that puts me as a sheep. You said, welcome to the pack, right? Like a wolf pack, be like, cool, right? But if you say, welcome to the flock, I'm like, are you calling me a sheep? No. The woman was a marketable commodity, just like today, and regarded as a piece of inanimate property. See, back in this day, the men made the woman inanimate property. Today, women do that, and they try to monetize it. Intertribal relationships were fragile. Greed for wealth and involvement in useless wars were the main objectives that governed their chiefs' selfish policies. Yeah, useless wars. Main objectives. Selfish politicians. Sounds a lot like today. Alright, family, we'll pause here and I'll upload this.